Mm.
Okay, we're not going to add a title because I. Just waiting to buffer. Okay, welcome. Hi, everyone who's joining us on this Facebook Live Homeschooling Basics discussion panel. I know that people are joining from all over the Lehigh Valley, the state of Pennsylvania, and even some in Jersey and all over the place. So we welcome you, and we just are so excited to be here with you. We all love homeschooling. We're homeschooling moms. And we hope that this is just a good resource for you to understand and just know the first steps and the basics of homeschooling. So, my name is Leslie, and I'll be the moderator today. And just I'll be giving a little bit of just direction as far as our question and answer time goes. I'm joined by five other lovely women here, and they'll be speaking on some different topics. This is Lisa, and she'll be talking on just the first legal steps and education evaluations that take place. I have right over here Katie. And Katie will be talking a little bit about curriculum that you can choose and the different methods of homeschooling that there are. Over here we have Eileen, and Eileen will be talking a little bit about homeschooling your special needs child. We have Amanda, and I want to thank Amanda because she's the one who pulled us all together for this. Um, and she'll be talking. She gets a lot of good topics, guys. Scheduling and routines. She'll be talking about socialization and debunking some of the myths that you may have heard about regarding homeschooling. And then we have Maria, and Maria is going to be just sharing with us a little bit about homeschooling your high schooler because it's possible and it's a wonderful experience. Um, so we would just ask that if you have a question, ask it. Even right now, you could type one in. It might be covered, it might not, but then I'll be gathering them to go over them during our Q&A time. The more general the question, the more of a chance that we'll be able to do it live here and answer it live. For example, a specific question on a particular type of curriculum or perhaps a really personal scenario that might be better off being asked in a Facebook group. For example, the Homeschool Moms of the Lehigh Valley. It's a fantastic resource for asking those types of questions. But there's no question that we don't want you to ask. So please ask. We are available to answer what you have. So without further ado, I am going to just ask Lisa to kick us off.
Okay, good evening. My name's Lisa. I have three sons, 16, 15, and 11. We have been homeschooling for about 10 years, and I'm going to talk about the basics of the basic. So these are the very beginning steps for homeschooling. If you're interested in homeschooling, you would start with what's called the affidavit. That's an official document that a lot of school districts in Pennsylvania would provide for you. You have it signed and notarized, and it goes on file with your school district. So this is for Pennsylvania homeschoolers. It's not required in New Jersey. And it's also found on a website called homeschoolpennsylvania.org. You can find an example of one there. So for the 2020-2021 school year, you do have to register every child you're homeschooling who will be turning age 6 and above. This is a change from previous years, but this year it is required. A high school diploma is required to homeschool for the person overseeing the homeschool program. And then you, along with the affidavit, are required to submit an outline of home education objectives by subject. So this might be kind of hard to see, but I have headings here for math, for reading, for writing. I list the curriculum that I'm using, and then list a few things that my student will be covering. So I have 3 sons, and so I have grade 5 here, but if you have multiple children, you would have one of these for each grade level for your children. Then you would also need a log. Oh, not yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. For right now, let's stick with that. All right, so in addition to the educational objectives, you would need to give your school district evidence of immunization or a religious exemption. You would also need to have evidence of health and dental services. You can keep those records at home, but you need to sign a statement that you have those, and you need to give that to your school district along with the affidavit. And then children who would be identified by a Pennsylvania licensed clinical or certified psychologist for special education services, that would include gifted students. They should attach a written notification of approval. So the affidavit is notarized. Some school districts supply that service for free, as does the Easton Area School District that I live in. Some you will have to find your own notary. They're notarized and they're put on file with your school district, and then you'll receive a letter acknowledging that your school district has received it. I always keep that letter on file along with my affidavit. Remember that if you have preschoolers and you're looking at homeschooling, or you have a kindergartner who will not be turning 6, you can go ahead and start homeschooling them. You don't have to wait until you officially file an affidavit. So you can be homeschooling them at home without filing that. And then once you file your affidavit, your school district in Pennsylvania, again, not in New Jersey, everything's separate there, but in Pennsylvania, once you file that affidavit, your school district is going to require that you hand in an evaluator form at the end of your school year. That'll be due on June 30th. So you'll go through your school year, you'll choose your curriculum, you'll homeschool, you'll keep examples of what you do, and toward the end of your school year, you'll need to find an evaluator. Again, a good place to look is that homeschoolpennsylvania.org for an evaluator. You'll find an evaluator, and the evaluator will see examples of what your students have done and give you a form with their certification on it that you will hand to your school district. You just have to take the form to the school district. What do you need in that portfolio? First of all, you're going to need a log of all your resources and your books read. So we just keep an ongoing log throughout the school year for that school year for each child of any book they're using. Some people put both curriculum and read aloud books and books for pleasure on here. I usually list my curriculum on my objectives, so this is just books that my son has read on this log. There's some flexibility there. You'll also need a log of proof of doing your 180 days or 900 instructional hours. I do just a calendar that's a little lesson plan book, and I just put in our days that way and check them off as we go. But you'll just need some evidence that you've completed your 180 days. You do not have to wait till you've completed all your 180 days to do your evaluation. It's probably best to be near the end of those, but you need some type of log to keep track of them. So what goes in your portfolio and what's evaluated? For the elementary level, and we do have some, Maria will talk on the high school level, but for the elementary level, you're going to include writings, photos of projects, screenshots, worksheets, examples from workbooks, artwork, creative materials used or developed by the student. And this can be paper or it can be virtual. So you can keep all of this. If you don't like paper, you can keep all of this online and just have a file for your student and just show your evaluator everything they've done online. So I don't know how well you can see this, but I brought just a few examples. This would be for math. You just keep these in your portfolio. I like to keep them going throughout the year and keep the portfolio growing as we go so that when I get to the end of the school year, I'm not overwhelmed with having to put everything in. So as we complete something, we like to put it right into our portfolios. Just a few samples of what would go in there. You are required to cover these basic subjects, and this will be listed for you again on that homeschoolpennsylvania.org. You'll see this in different places, but I'll just read over it quickly. You're required to include these subject areas for elementary. English to include spelling, reading and writing, arithmetic, science, geography, history of the United States and Pennsylvania, civics, safety education, including regular and continuous instruction in the dangers and prevention of fires, health and physiology, physical education, music, and art. Also, if you have a student in grades 3, 5, or 8, you'll need to have standardized testing completed, and in your portfolio, you'll need a copy of the standardized achievement tests, the results of the standardized achievement tests. So evaluators for the elementary level need to be certified on the elementary level. You'll need to look for that as you look for an evaluator. As I mentioned, you would have your evaluation toward the end of the school year, and then the evaluator form you would hand into your school district by June 30th. And then just to wrap up my segment, I'll touch briefly on standardized tests. As I said, they're required in grades 3, 5, and 8. There's a list of acceptable tests, including the Terra Nova, the California Achievement, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the Metropolitan Achievement, Peabody Achievement, Woodcock-Johnson. There's several to choose from. Testing can be done online or it can be paper. There's paper options. And you're required to have testing in reading and language arts and math. Some tests will give you other options for science and history, which you might like to do, but they're not required. We usually order our testing through an online site called Seton Testing, S-E-T-O-N, but there's a lot of testing that you can find online to order. And I think that wraps up my segment.
Okay, so thanks, Lisa.
You're
we did
welcome.
have a couple of questions, and instead of saving them, I think I'm just going to ask you right away
Yeah,
because
sure.
they're very pertaining to what you were saying. So Rachel asks, is it necessary to list what curriculum you are using?
There's some freedom for homeschoolers. I don't think it's required anywhere that I remember, but it is nice to have that listed somewhere, and your evaluator may ask for that. So I would suggest that you do.
But as far as the affidavit goes, it's not legally binding. So
No.
if you think right now, I think we're going to head in this direction with a subject or with a specific curriculum, you're not legally bound to that. You can change. You can change your mind as you get into your school year and find that it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And then there was one other point, and then this is the confusing point for all of us. And the question is from Lauren, and it says, what is the cutoff month for turning 6? It is it September 1st. We wish people would be clearer on that.
This legislation was passed through very quickly last year, and we're all a bit unclear on it, and then COVID happened. So I know as we talked about this, we had even tried to look on some of the Pennsylvania education sites, and there was not clarity on this. I think if your child and we as homeschoolers have flexibility too when we begin. So technically, I guess when you begin counting your 180 days, if your child turns 6 within that period, we would suggest that you file the affidavit. Are we in agreement on
Yeah,
that?
I think that's
or any
probably
other
good.
comments on that?
Yeah.
I don't feel that I'm an expert on that by any means. So if anybody wants to chime in, please go ahead.
I know the precedent in the past has been somewhere within that first 2 weeks of September, like the beginning of a school year, so that if your child is 5 at this point and then turns 6 within the first 2 weeks, then you would include them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they haven't, this would have been the precedent from 8 years old.
Yes.
If that would carry into the new law, then,
Mm-hmm.
if your child maintains that age and you've carried into the new year, into the new school year, then you could wait until the next year. You could go ahead and homeschool, like you were saying,
Right.
but you could delay filing until the next year and just file them as first grader
Right.
or whatever grade they're at.
Whatever age.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's more questions, everybody, but I'm going to save those particular ones for the Q&A. So we're going to move on so we give Maria the time she needs right now. So go ahead,
All right.
Maria.
Well, hello. My name is Maria. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I have 6 children, and my oldest is 20, and my youngest just turned 8. And 2 of my children have graduated and are moving on to college. I have a junior this next year, 7th grader, 5th grader, and 3rd grader this coming year. So that's a little bit about myself. I've been homeschooling from the very beginning. Okay, so when people ask me specifically about homeschooling high school, there's typically 3 things that they're concerned about. They're concerned about, how will my homeschooler get a diploma? Can my homeschooler get into college? And how do I teach high school curriculum? That can be a really overwhelming thing for a lot of parents. So that's what I'm going to cover in my section. So first off, how can my homeschooler get a diploma? And yes, the answer is yes. And there are 3 main ways that they can get a diploma. First of all, there is a state recognized diploma. Pennsylvania is unique in this, in that they have allowed this in their law, that if you follow certain guidelines, you can get a state recognized diploma. So to do this, you'll be working with an evaluator who is certified for high school. So homeschooling.org or PA.
Homeschoolpennsylvania.org. I think CHAP oversees that
Okay.
site.
Yeah, I know that you can. It's been so long since I've had to look for an evaluator. I forgot where I found mine. But there are places online where you can see evaluators and you can see if they are certified for high school. For this diploma, you would need a minimum of 4 years of English, 3 years of mathematics, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, and 2 years of arts and humanities. And each year you would have an evaluator evaluate your high schooler just like they do for elementary grades. And at the end of 12th grade, there's a print off that you can get off of the Department of Education for Pennsylvania, their website. And it is just a diploma, and you sign it as the supervisor, and your evaluator signs it, and then your school district signs it. In Pennsylvania, there are also about 9 diploma programs that you can work through. This is the choice I have gone through only because when I started homeschooling, I did not know that doing just my own state recognized diploma was an option. So I have done this and it's been great. So we've just kept doing it. The requirements will all be the same for these diploma programs. Well, they won't be the same, but they will at least include what is required by the state. And they often will have more parameters that you have to, like requirements that you have to finish to get a diploma through them. And typically they'll have evaluators that are certified to evaluate for that particular diploma program. The nice thing is, so our evaluator takes care of our transcripts, and they often ours has a nice graduation ceremony at the end, which is kind of a nice thing to do. So that diploma will also be a state recognized diploma by the state of Pennsylvania. And then the third thing that you can do is you can just do a parent issued diploma. And I would say most homeschoolers nationwide do this option because Pennsylvania is unique in that you can get a state recognized diploma. And for this, you set your own parameters, and then you can just search for a template for a diploma online. All right. Second question is, can my high schooler get into college? And again, the answer is yes. We have searched many colleges, and they all are very accustomed to homeschoolers. They understand that our curriculum and our education may look a little different than their public school counterparts, and they're normally okay with that. They will often allow parent written transcripts and parent letters of recommendation. And oftentimes they will look at portfolios of your child's work just to see, because a homeschooler's education may look a little bit off of the traditional education. They want to see holistically what the child is capable of. Now, colleges do want to make sure that a child's going to be successful in their atmosphere, in their setting, and can handle college work. So it is important to be cognizant of that. Okay. Oh, I wanted to also share a tip. So when my oldest started approaching high school, about 6th or 7th grade, I kind of wrote out a 6-year plan, and I wrote it out with the end in mind. Because I've been homeschooling since the beginning, I could do that in 6th grade. And I just wrote out, I went to a handful of different colleges, from Ivy League and local colleges, all maybe 10 or so. And I just looked what their requirements are, as how many years of English and how many years of foreign language and how many years of math do these want. And I just kind of wrote those all down, and I keep that with my planning. And when I wrote out a plan for them for high school, I was able to keep them on track to know, like, okay, are we hitting those 4 years of this? Have we met our requirement for this? And it can be flexible. Ours has always changed from year to year, but at least I know that we're keeping on track. So that's a little tip. As far as testing goes, there's no state mandated testing for high schoolers, but if your child is college bound, you want to make sure that they are taking their SATs and ACTs at the appropriate years. Typically, sophomores do a practice PSAT their sophomore year, and then they start taking their ACT and SATs like the end of their sophomore year and throughout their junior year. All right, so for our final concern that I want to address is, how do I find high school curriculum? And there are many curriculum options. The first option is dual enrollment. Dual enrollment means that your child is taking class typically at a local community college. So for us in this area, it would be L-Tri-C or Northampton Community College. And if you go onto their website, you can look at their dual enrollment options, and they typically will have a counselor that you can work with. And ours, in our experience, has been super helpful. She'll help us find the courses that best fit our child. Something to keep in mind, that not every course that you take at a community college is going to transfer to every college. So be aware of that, because you might be paying money for these colleges or these college courses, but they may not transfer as credits to the final destination college. So that's just something that you want to look into. A good thing about dual enrollment, though, is that if you're working with a local community college, they have school districts that they work with, and per credit is typically about half the cost. So you can get a very good deal that way. Another option for curriculum is there's lots of places that have online AP courses, and for an online, it's an advanced placement. And this is a class that will prepare a child to take the AP test at the end of the school year. And if they score typically a 4 or 5, sometimes a 3, that can get them college credit as well. These classes can be very rigorous, and the tests can be quite difficult. So you might want to weigh if your child's a good test taker, whether that's a good option for you. Our family, we've done about 18 AP courses amongst all my high school age kids. And I would say half of them we have done through an online course, and half of them my husband and I just made up the course. And then we couldn't call it AP because that's a brand name by the college board, but we called it honors and in parentheses AP prep. And then they took the test, and you can get a good college credit for that too. All right, another option is accredited online courses. And I can't say I have a lot of experience with this. I've researched it, but it hasn't worked for any of my children. But I know like Liberty Online, Some colleges will offer some high school courses. So that's just something to research, that it is a thing that's out there. And then putting together your own curriculum, not necessarily your whole math curriculum or whatever, but saying, I want this for math and this for history. That's an option. And there's so many choices out there, and they write these books for high schoolers, and oftentimes so a high schooler can open the book and teach themselves. And we've done a lot of classes like that, and they're great. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that there's lots of experts, and just speak up, ask people around you. There's people in our community, people at your church, maybe people at your work or your husband's work or wherever, who has a passion for something or is an expert in a subject. And oftentimes they're very happy to tutor or to give you some extra help. There's co-ops often in the area where it's, a mom who maybe was an English major will teach an English class or teach debate. So there's lots of options that way. Personally, for me, when I designed my children's high school education, I took in mind where they wanted to go, like what was their next destination, and what their learning styles were, and what their gifts were, and what their weaknesses were. And I kind of tailored their education so that they could be the most successful, learn the most, and also shine for the college that they wanted to get into. So that is all I have for high school. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
It was super helpful.
Yes, I'm not there yet, but thank you.
I had a mom encourage me once when my kids were far from high school, and she was, I was not sure that I would go all the way. And she was like, are you kidding me? High school's where the gold is.
Oh,
Like,
gosh,
you
yeah.
have done so much investment that when you get them to high school and you see them embrace,
Yeah, and can I say that I've had, because there are things that it is overwhelming, and there are times where I've been like, I can't provide that because we don't have the numbers, we don't have the funding just as a family. And I've asked my kids, and they're so happy to learn at their own pace. Like they are so, and oftentimes my high schoolers design their own curriculum. They say, this is what I want to learn. Like this year, my junior, I was like, okay, what do you want to do for history? And he said, I really want to learn biographies. And for our diploma program, you have to read 25 books, and 3 of them have to be classics. And he has this big set of books of all these biographies of different business leaders, presidents, all sorts of people. And he has just kind of made his own curriculum. And then the relationship, nothing replaces that relationship you get. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, so I just want to remind everybody, keep your questions coming in. If you have a question, just type it on down. We're going to talk with Eileen next, and Eileen is tag teaming with Emily. And Emily, you'll be able to see in the comments, Eileen is actually going to be reading what Emily has written. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us physically here tonight, but Eileen is going to just give a little bit of a testimony of what special needs homeschooling looks like in Emily's household. And she'll say it's very different in everybody's household, and there's such a huge range of special needs. If you have any extra questions, please type them in there, and Emily would be happy to answer them for you. So go ahead, Eileen.
Well, just to let everybody know, I have been homeschooling my kids from the get-go. I remember always being bored in school. And I remember reading our literature textbooks in particular, and it would just be a little snippet of something. And I didn't understand why we weren't reading the whole book. So that's pretty much, boredom was pretty much my story as far as why I'm here, homeschooling. And I have loved it. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. So I'm going to be reading what Emily has written now. And Emily is a good friend of mine. I am a mom to 4 children, ages 5 to 13, and we have always homeschooled. Because of that, I don't have direct experience with moving from in-school to homeschooling when it comes to handling an IEP and any services, but I will give the information I have and some resources for those situations. Most of all, I want to encourage those of you who are wondering how homeschooling can work with your particular situation. if it will help or hinder your child who has unique challenges, and if you have what it takes to take over from your current schooling situation. None of us on this panel have encountered every possible situation for the area we are speaking on, and I am acutely aware that my experience is limited. For context, in my home, we have had our considerations related to anxiety, gross and fine motor delay, low muscle tone, expressive language delay, and language processing difficulties, ADHD, both hyperactive and inattentive types, dyslexia, and also one autistic child. I also share my many organizational, time management, and decision-making challenges with my children who have ADHD, so much of how we approach homeschooling is designed to help all of us succeed. One of my favorite parts of homeschooling has always been the flexibility. I'm just going to chime in here and say I think that's probably the same for everyone. It's just the freedom is just amazing. Whether it's the curriculum you use, how you schedule lessons, which activities you do with one child or multiple children, when you take a field trip or have library day, these are all things that you get to decide, or I should say, you get to arrange to meet your particular family's needs. There are still choices to make and different limitations, but much of it is up to you. When it comes to children who need extra support in different areas, this flexibility is golden. The flip side is that many of our children have particular needs for structure, for routines that help them know what to expect. Again, it's not always getting to have my first choice in how to do this, but I do get to decide what will work for my family and meet all of our needs. A related point is that homeschooling is already one big collection of accommodations. Small class size, frequent breaks and extra time to finish work or shorter lessons, sensory avoiding or seeking options, individualized lessons and attention, time for therapy and to rest. These are all built in or can be added. If your child reads or is read to while hanging upside down, if she answers math questions while jumping on a trampoline, if he finds a river on a map with a fidget spinner in his hand or a chewing toy in his mouth, if she writes a poem in the car on the way to occupational therapy, if that therapy counts as PE for the day, when it comes to any child, but especially children who need specific support, it can happen the way your child needs it to happen. I'm happy to talk more about how to manage specific accommodations, but I will say that I've had several doctors and therapists say that homeschooling is already doing what we recommend. One consideration is that homeschooling children are generally not eligible in Pennsylvania for services through the school districts. Many of those are less necessary when a child is not immersed in the school environment, but there are also options in the community for therapy that can be arranged without the challenge of disrupting school and homework schedules. We have been involved in speech, occupational, physical, and counseling therapies through our primary insurance, as well as medical assistance, even while never going through the school district. All of this can allow you to meet your child's needs and to avoid the issues of disruptions to routine, even during normal times with snow days and such, but it can also be overwhelming. You may still be involved in therapies outside the home, but you take on a lot of the responsibility when you decide to homeschool. Be willing to ease into a new arrangement. Be ready to take breaks to reassess. Reach out to other parents who walk in similar shoes. I'd like to recommend a Facebook group for anyone with a child with special needs. Lehigh Valley and Slate Belt PA Special Needs Parent Support Group includes a good number of homeschooling parents who are excellent resources, as is the group as a whole. I encourage you to join. I am available to answer questions and chat during and after the session, and please also feel free to contact me directly. I'll put that information in the chat as well. Right? Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Eileen. Okay, so we have Amanda up next, and Amanda's going to be tackling a big subject, one that I'd say that all of us probably get more questions on from people who are just looking into homeschooling than any other. We've heard many myths. We kind of try to, as much as possible, dispel them, dispelling negative stereotypes, and also the question of, well, how does this look? How do I get it to work in my home? So, Amanda, it's a big task, but you've got
I
it.
can do it.
Yes.
I'm Amanda. I have been homeschooling my 3 kids for 6 years now. My daughter will be going into 7th grade, and then I have a son who's going into 5th grade and a son going into 3rd grade. So I'm still kind of at the elementary level. But prior to that, I was a teacher. And so homeschooling kind of came naturally for me because I always was a teacher. But that's not the case for everybody sitting here tonight. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about teaching, it's not. You don't have to have a degree in education. You don't have to be a teacher. That's not what homeschooling means. And that brings me to my first point, and probably the most best piece of advice that anyone ever gave me. And she simply said, homeschooling is not school at home. It's not. I was a teacher. I've been there, done that. I don't do what's done in a school setting at home with my kids. Not to say that you couldn't. You could have a very strict schedule, but if you're thinking back to what your kids did this past year prior to the closing of schools and all of the materials of worksheets that they came home with and this structured schedule that the teacher had every day for those students, and then thinking what you did or tried to do as best you could with your kids during the sort of crisis schooling when the schools were shut down at home and you were scrambling and the Zoom didn't always work and the worksheets were kind of missing. That's not what homeschooling is either. So take those thoughts and just throw them away, because I think you've heard a lot tonight about the beauty of the flexibility that we have. Sure, you have some boxes that you have to check, but beyond those boxes, you really can choose. Your students, as they get older, can choose. It's just a wonderful option. So definitely start by keeping that in mind. And my second top tip for you is don't do this alone. You might be the only one in your circle of friends right now who's considering homeschooling, and everybody's giving you the hairy eyeball, like, you're going to do what? Find someone who knows homeschooling, who's been there. We all started somewhere. I may have felt a little bit more comfortable because I was a teacher, but definitely what I'm doing now is never what I did before. And I've met so many wonderful friends through homeschooling. And, you know, it's so great to have people who are with me with kids my age, and then the next step coming in the future with high schoolers. It's so wonderful. So definitely find buddies that you can do this with. Okay, so scheduling. How are you going to do this at home? Well, like I said before, you could devise some sort of schedule and do your best to follow it each day. Not every day is going to look the same. What I would encourage you to do is get through your core main subjects every day, which would be language arts that Lisa mentioned earlier, and math. If you make a point of trying to get through those, they're more demanding than the rest. So I recommend that you tackle them every day. All of the minor subjects is what's going to break up your day and make it different from one day to the next. One day you might do social studies and the next day you don't. You replace it with art, or you might have a gym class on Wednesday, but you don't do gym until the following week. So definitely don't think that you have to set this rigid structure schedule and follow it. Another challenge that I personally have had is when I first started homeschooling, I had a baby, and then the baby grew up and was a toddler, and then that baby grew up and that toddler grew up and now he was a preschooler. And that's very challenging. So if you're considering homeschooling and you still have younger children at home, there's so many different ways around that. For example, the little guy took naps, and that was a great time to get in some schooling. And then that little guy went to preschool, and while he was at preschool, we got a lot done, because you can't do a lot when he's through the house. Some people choose to school at night when your spouse is at home, and then the spouse can take care of the little children while you can focus on the older kids. And another thing you can do is school throughout the year. You don't have to follow the normal school schedule. If you can get in a few hours here on a Saturday afternoon, or you want to count this Sunday as a work day, you have the flexibility to do all of that. Moving along to some things that I do at home to kind of help things move along. None of us will have 4 kids in the same class because all of our children are different ages. So you're going to have to try to wrap your head around, how are we going to get 3 different age level kids through all these different subjects every week? What I like to do with my kids being in 3rd, 5th, and 7th grade is lump together a lot of the minor subjects. So our art projects look very similar. For science, we're all studying the same topic, and it might look a little more difficult for my 7th grader, but it's certainly watered down for the 3rd grader. The next thing that I like to do is do something, I just came up with this on my own, something that I call a 20-20-20. So we take 20 minutes 3 times and we rotate through stations. So we might do something like a little computer exercise during that, maybe an educational game or a video that one child is quietly watching. My kids happen to take music lessons, so another child is working on the instrument practice that they need to get done that day. And then I have that time to work one-on-one with the other student who might need some one-on-one attention while the other two are engaged in their activities off on their own. So there's plenty of ways that you can be flexible in dealing with this schedule. And I can assure you that this is going to be trial and error for you. You might develop this beautifully laid out schedule and then you actually start in September or August or whenever you choose, and you crumble it up and throw it out the window because it just doesn't work. And you're going to gather tips and tricks from other homeschoolers who have been there before, and you will figure it out. So don't go into this thinking you have to have this rigid schedule. It won't work. Okay, moving on. Well, it doesn't work for me. I shouldn't say that. Maria sounds very organized.
Oh.
I'm not.
It
I'm
works
not
for
even
me,
sure.
but that's
I'm not
just
even
me.
sure why they picked me to talk about scheduling, but they did.
Can I put in a thing right
Please.
there? So when I was in that stage where I had a baby and a toddler and I was pregnant, throwing up and everything, and then I read this article and it was called "Sometimes the Baby is the Lesson."
Yeah.
And that is okay. I mean, life happens, and you know what? That's a learning experience. To take time to do something else. And another thing that I will readily admit to is that almost every year, I have a false start. I have a day that we're going to start, and then it's horrible. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just not ready. And so then we just wait a week and we start again. And then it's fine. Almost every year, I just plan for it. When I count, like, okay, if I start here 180 days, I'm just like, okay, this is my false week. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great because that goes back to the flexibility, really,
Yeah.
and that's the key and the beauty of all of this. I'm going to segue over to Corey's notes. Corey is one of the admins of this Facebook group. She has some great suggestions on socialization. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight, but I will do my best to weigh in here on Corey's thoughts. So, she started off talking about co-ops, and Maria, I believe, mentioned co-ops too. So a co-op is a cooperative learning experience where a bunch of homeschooling moms, usually with a common interest, gather together several times a week, several times a month, and they go over curriculum. So, or just fun opportunities. They all look different, and you can find one that meets your family's needs. So Corey said here that you can look for ones that have multiple levels and ages. Some of them have really great supplemental offerings. Some of them, the price point is going to make or break it for you, the meeting times and the frequencies. Some of them have volunteer obligations where you're going to have to be on site and volunteering. So these are all things to look for when you're considering a homeschool. The age and the grade level that it would involve, so it might not include the babies, it might not include the homeschoolers. Make sure you check into those things. Some are religious, some are secular. She's in a bunch of different co-ops, and she chooses co-ops to offer things that she can't do at home. And I would echo that. It's very difficult to do a gym class with a 3rd grader and a 5th grader and a 7th grader and you. We've tried it, and there's ghost runners on all these bases, and I'm confused, and no one knows the score. So if you find something like that where you can't do it at home, in our homeschool co-op this year, we dissected a frog. I could probably cut open a frog, but I wouldn't really know what I'm looking at. So I was ridiculously thankful for the experts who could guide me through that. And that's really what my motivation is for seeking a co-op beyond socialization. So here are some of the co-ops that are available in our area in the Lehigh Valley. This list will be online later, but just to run through it quick. Chase is the co-op that I'm a part of. That meets in Palmer Township. That's a Christian co-op. There's also Classical Conversations. It looks like there's 2 groups of Classical Conversations meeting within the Lehigh Valley. One's in Coopersburg and one is in Palmerton. They are both Christian organizations. There's a homeschool co-op called Etch, which meets in Allentown. That's Christian as well. Excelsior Homeschool Cooperative meets in Allentown. Fireside Academy is a popular one in the Lehigh Valley. That is a secular one that meets in Allentown as well. Peak is a secular co-op that meets in Tannersville. There's Providence Hybrid Academy that is a hybrid school option where your kids go to school 2 days a week, I believe,
Yeah.
and then they're home with you 3 days a week. That is meeting this year in Coopersburg. I believe this is pronounced Scola, and that meets in Quakertown. There's Friday classes at Bethel in Emmaus. There's also a Charlotte Mason meetup at local nature spots throughout the Lehigh Valley. There are days listed here, which I didn't read them because sometimes that changes. But when you look at this list later, you can check into their websites for more information. Moving on. We all know socialization is important. I'm going to get to that more in detail in a second. Here are some fun homeschool activities that Corey's created a list of. There's homeschool gym classes in Bath at a location called In the Zone. You can also check out the Kids Co-op for gymnastics classes. My kids did that this past year. They had a great time. That's in Easton. Movement Theater is in Nazareth, and they offer homeschool theater classes. Parkettes is a gym located in Allentown that offers gymnastics. Schoolopoly is a homeschool game group that meets in Emmaus. There's a location of Skateaway that's in Whitehall and also in Bethlehem, and they have dates where you can go and do a homeschool roller skate activity. And Corey also, this is a good note too. Just about everywhere you look today, there's something being offered for homeschoolers during the day. So you could check into your local library or your local science center. You could check into zoos and aquariums. There's historical sites such as Quiet Valley Farm and even Colonial Williamsburg, just to name a few. And there's so many more. I know we went to Legoland in Florida once and got the homeschooling week rate. So you could just do a simple Google search if there's something you really want to do with your kids. It's out there. Some local schools, Lisa mentioned Easton. I'm in the Easton School District as well. They allow us to participate during the day in some of their activities. My daughter takes violin lessons. She's also in the orchestra. My sons have taken the gym class and the art class at the local elementary school. So check with your local school district. What are their offerings? They definitely will let you do anything extracurricular after the day, like sports or clubs that might meet after the day. So check into that. Now, this is a fun part. Let's take a break here and segue into this. Corey tackled some of the common myths of homeschooling. And I can guarantee you that you're going to definitely come in contact with some of these if you haven't already. Probably from your parents when you tell them that you're thinking of homeschooling their grandkids. And definitely the old lady behind you at the grocery store on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. who wants to know why there's no school today. I always tell her they're in school now. And then, anyway, here we go. So, number one, my child won't be socialized. I think this is the farthest from the truth because if I think back to myself being in school and me being a teacher, when could you talk in school? When did you develop a relationship in school? Because it wasn't during math class. It wasn't when you were walking in the hallway. You were barely allowed to talk at lunchtime. Recess was 15 minutes a day. So I feel like in school, there's this misconception of a lot of genuine relationships forming. But I think all you're really doing in school is thinking, oh, I might want to play with her, and then calling her after school and getting together with her. Whereas it's quite the opposite when you homeschool because you're spending a lot of quality time with people your own age, with a lot of different children, exploring your own interests, meeting up at a park for a play date, hitting up the local co-op and checking out their classes. It's the complete opposite, in my opinion, that your kids won't be socialized. They'll be over-socialized. Number two, I can't teach my kids blank because I'm horrible at it. And Corey's notes were, or maybe these were some of your thoughts too. Elementary school is a piece of cake, and I agree. And even if you think that there's something you struggle with, there's so many resources out there, not just other moms, but there's a great resource that I've taken advantage of. Rainbow Resource is a great place to purchase curriculum. And I've called them before and said, I'm looking for a certain spelling curriculum. And they walked me through different options and what they would afford me. So you definitely are not doing this alone. Don't be intimidated by a certain curriculum or a subject. Don't think you can't do it. Number three, my child doesn't like this book or curriculum or workbook, so I need to find something else. Find something else. You don't have to stick with what you thought you were going to stick with. I've gotten a third of the way through things and said, this is terrible, and threw it out and bought something else because it doesn't work. And I think, Katie, you addressed that earlier, that whatever you type up that you're intending to do at the beginning of the year isn't set in stone. It's very flexible. Definitely can change it. I'm borrowing resources from some people right now that I haven't yet returned. So there's countless options out there for you to explore. Number 4, I have to use the curriculum the school provides. You can. If they have an extra copy, they'll lend it to you, but you by no means have to. We heard about that from Maria and others as well. You can pick and choose whatever you would like to do. Number 5, homeschool kids are spelling bee champs and prodigies. That doesn't speak about my children. But what you will note is that you know your kids better than anyone else. So if they do have a certain interest, you can use that to really get them to understand and appreciate other things. You can tap into that interest or that extra ability or talent that they might have and use that to your advantage to get them to learn other materials. So definitely we're not spelling bee champs and prodigies. Are your kids spelling bee champs?
Oh, no.
Okay. Number 6, homeschool kids are sheltered. This depends on you. And what's nice about that is you can shelter them from what you want to shelter them from and expose them to what you want to expose them from. This is kind of one of the reasons why I homeschool, because when I'm sending them into school, they're exposed to the opinions of the adults who are overseeing them during the day. And what they tell my children might not necessarily be what I want my children to be exposed to at the time. Some of the situations that go on in the daily news, I don't really want my 3rd grader to be concerned about because he's not ready for that information. And so as a homeschool mom, I have the ability to pick and choose what I expose my children to. So if they're sheltered, what's nice about it is because you're picking and choosing what to expose them to. And finally, number 7, homeschool moms have it all together. I could never do that. That's right. We do have it all together. No, we do not have it all together. If you would come into any of our homes during a random day, you would see that there are so many things going great, and there are definitely things going wrong and crazy, and that's just the way it is. And I think we've all learned to just be gracious to each other and give ourselves some grace that today was a great day and we got a lot done, and tomorrow might not be that way. And I definitely do not have it all together. Does anybody want to add to any of those myths? Anything that I missed?
I think with the number 7, that last one too, is us having it all together. It's like anything else. If you really care about it, you do need to do your work and you do need to prepare. But if you're watching this right now, that means you're already there and you've already got a lot of resources at your fingertips. And also, there's an assumption there that the schools have it all together. Now, I'm not at all by any means placing a blanket condemnation on them. That's not what I mean. But looking back on my own experience, I had some teachers that were amazing, and I still remember them, and I'm so grateful for them. And I had other teachers who were just kind of blah. So I don't think I think we should get away with the assumption that public and private schools have it all together all the time, because they're human too.
Can I add something to that too? Is that my experience has been that homeschooling has been an awesome opportunity for me to grow as a human and as a mother in ways that I couldn't have otherwise. And I'm grateful for those opportunities. And so even though it's tried a lot of my weaknesses, I've strengthened them through this opportunity. So.
And then also, like, what is the point of an education? For me, the point of an education is that my children are good people, and you can really work through a lot of that and can think for themselves. And you can do a lot of that when you are there every day with them, and they say, and you've just read something in history about, like, last year we read about the Irish potato famine, and it was really sad. But it opened up, these kinds of things open up really deep discussions that you can't really have in a classroom because the teachers, I don't think, are quite able to have a deep discussion with all of their students on this. So those deep discussions, I think, are invaluable.
I have one more thought if it's okay to share. So I've heard a lot of concerns sometimes about there being gaps. Like, what if I don't hit everything? And I just want to point out that there will be gaps. I mean, my education has gaps. My husband, who has gone all the way through, he has a PhD, his education has gaps. Even in his specialty, he has gaps. Education is a lifelong journey, and you really want you want solid math and like language arts. You want to be your children to be able to express themselves, and then everything else you just want broad and teach them how to learn, where you get information to learn, to love to learn, and then they will keep learning. You're not going to be able to teach them everything there is to know in 12 years. That's not the point of an education, really. So
Okay, well, I guess, thank you, Amanda. That was amazing. And like I said, guys, if you have any questions, send them in. We have our last speaker, and it's Katie. And Katie has a ton of experience, guys. So she's going to be talking a little bit about the curriculum you can choose and the methods you can use when homeschooling. And this is important lingo for everybody to know, because any homeschooling website you go on, they'll say things like, well, this is Charlotte Mason method. And you might be scratching your head saying, who is Charlotte Mason and what does she do? And so Katie's going to explain some of that stuff.
I am not going to answer that question for you. But I will tell you, it's an exciting adventure to find out, well, if you've ever done personality studies or Enneagram studies and you start to understand your way of processing, that's sort of what you're doing when you begin the homeschool journey, and you find out what methods are utilized and what might be best for your style of teaching, but also is well received by your students. So my name's Katie Kroll. I'm from Easton. And I'm a mom of 8 with number 9 on the way any day. This fall will be my 15th year homeschooling, and I'm learning every year as I go. I'm always asking questions. I was on the phone with somebody today saying, what should I do about this subject that we're heading into? Am I too early in high school to introduce this to my 10th grader? So it's always a learning experience. But most of the study that I did on the different learning and teaching styles was done at the beginning of my homeschool career. And I feel like it might be dated. So you might know more than I do about what's out there today. There's a lot of different styles that are available. And so I might not cover all of them, but I'll cover some of the main ones that are readily available through curriculum. And Amanda, thank you for addressing, like, I was worried that people would expect that maybe what they had experienced in the last few months with the health crisis that we're in would be a reflection of what homeschool might be like. But this is why, like, once you start to understand the different styles, homeschool can become so exciting and fun for you, because it doesn't have to be what someone's telling you to do. Although there are some people who like a script, and so that's available. There's curriculum that can give you, good morning, student. How are you today? Work through, just read that script, and then you and your child will dialogue, and you'll find freedom in that. So we'll talk a little bit about those different methods. Okay, so I would think that the first one is probably traditional. The traditional method, which is planned, scripted, measurable with assessments and quizzes and tests. It'll probably parallel or resemble what students would do in school. It might include standardized testing, the Common Core. Often these are prepackaged kits you can purchase. Public schools and private schools, probably your student could slip in and out of a public or private school more readily with the traditional methods. So it's short-term friendly. So if this was something that you were considering just for a year or two until you really fall in love with homeschooling and decide it's a lifelong endeavor, this might be a good way to get started. And so there are numerous curriculum. Some of the ones that I'm familiar with are Becca, Saxon, Bob Jones, Apologia, Houghton Mifflin, Institute for Excellence in Writing. Online, there are options for enrolling in an online schooling program, which is probably traditional as well, like K-12, Connections Academy, Achievement Charter, PA Virtual Charter, and so on. Like there's a lot out there. So that would kind of be the intro. Like there's the traditional type of homeschooling. The other end of the pendulum would be unschooling. This would be very flexible, child-centered. You follow their passions. There's a lot of experience, activity-based. This is not going to typically have conventional testing. The teacher is the facilitator rather than a lecturer. There's lots of books, living encounters. You had mentioned the Williamsburg and some of the other programs like POTS and, things that are available that kids could be gaining their experience through outside of the, schooling, traditional classroom feeling or tabletop. So there's a lot of individual expression in unschooling, and they are often led by example, or inspiration is kind of at the core. As far as curriculum goes, I was even saying, does anybody know? Like, and this one, really, it is just following their passion. So a lot of library borrowing, probably, books. There's so many great resources that are available for free today, too. So unschooling is not uncharted territory. It can be a very familiar territory. I can think of a number of friends who do this method successfully. So this is something that can be done, and it can be done very richly for your student. Another approach would be classical education. This one's rooted in the Roman and Greek style. That one, there's lots of memorization and facts in the early years, and then as the child develops, you kind of follow their 3 developmental stages, and as they deepen their knowledge, then they're starting to apply that. Then they can teach others. They embrace great books, so hands-on, classical literature. The text, this is preferred over textbooks. You're teaching them how to think, how to research, a lot of dialogue, Socratic dialogue, and often it'll incorporate Latin-based language acquisition, maybe Latin itself, or maybe some of the other Romantic languages. And so for curriculum for that one, I mentioned Classical Conversations, Memoria Press, Veritas Press, and these will be available to you. The list will be available to you online for more. Charlotte Mason is an exciting, you can't help but fall in love with Charlotte Mason as you learn more about her approach and how she appreciated a child for who they are. And so it's very child-directed. There's a lot of time in nature, roaming freely, exploring, studying, living books, again, biographies, life lesson books. That's one of the beautiful things about Charlotte Mason. And even though, as far as, you added a note to that one on curriculum. Can you tell me the curriculum?
Yeah, there is amblesideonline.org is one. And then there's also a website called A Delectable Education that has podcasts about the Charlotte Mason method. And they have a lot of, they offer a lot of services. That's what I do my curriculum. I set an appointment and I do a consultation with them. So you get a Charlotte Mason education, and just not everybody knows this, but Charlotte Mason actually is a kind of classical education. It's different than what we normally think of classical education, but it's under that umbrella. So I have a consultation with them, and they tell me, and they can tailor it to my family. There's also the Charlotte Mason Alviary and Modern Charlotte Mason. So if you just Google search those, you'll be able to find information. And from what I've seen, I mean, they're all excellent. I used Ambleside for a while. I still use it as a resource. It's a great resource. So
Excellent. I should have had you introduce that one as well.
that's all right.
But there's a lot of freedom in journaling and notebooking and that kind of stuff. So Bible reading, memorization could be incorporated a lot. It's also unit study friendly. So I think those who appreciate sunlight might enjoy that, there's the kind of overlap in subject area, that kind of thing. Okay, another is Montessori. That's hands off for the teachers as they're encouraging a child to follow their interest, and they're observing the child and making kinesthetic learning available to them, utilizing manipulatives. It's clutter controlled, which is why it probably would be difficult to work in my house, but it's possible. So you label things, they're learning by seeing and using and experiencing things. The older kids are helping the younger kids. It's definitely fostering creativity and art. So that would be something to explore. I mentioned unit studies already. Unit studies can get messy because it can just grow, but it can be amazing because you really can hone in on something that your child is really excited about and then just develop that. So in an unschooling kind of manner, but sort of, like directed, they can find textbooks, hands-on activities, the library books, creating their own lessons. They could do short games and skits. All of these things can cover multiple subjects, but all be kind of pooling on the same subject. Even some co-ops are kind of, willing to offer. Chase has offered a directed idea or concept, the theme, thank you,
yeah.
that we could cover and then like kind of pull that in from what we were doing at home and expand on it. So it's just holistic and overlapping your subjects. For instance, a study in Egypt could include the geography of Egypt. You could read from the book of Exodus. You could be talking about the theories of human origins and science and, the burial styles and things, the pyramids and triangles for geography, and you could see how it could overlap. So there was that style, and then I think I might have misplaced my last page. Oh, unschooling, we talked about. Eclectic would be probably the last. Eclectic is basically when you've had a lot of exposure to a lot of really good, amazing things and you have a hard time picking just one curriculum, you might be borrowing from the best of a lot of things. And the more experience you have with homeschooling, the more I find that a lot of moms have developed an eclectic styles following their child's passions, and maybe the cost of things or whatever is directing that. So some curriculum that I found, I'm not familiar with it, but A to Z Homes Cool, Time for Learning and Great Courses is also a good resource, especially in the high school years, for purchasing their videos or watching them online as they introduce topics in just in an amazing manner. So okay, so that wraps up kind of like the styles, and I didn't give those to you to overwhelm you with like, oh my gosh, there's all this homework. I really want to encourage you to like embrace the idea of like saying, what is best for me? What is best for my family, our schedule? What do my kids like? And then knowing that there's probably a whole world of information and curriculum out there to help you develop that and just embrace the joy of the journey. So some websites will be listed. There's a blog HSLDA posted that had this excellent quiz that you could take. I think there might have been like 30 questions or something, but it really gave excellent results with numbers that were tiered for what your style would be. So I was learning about myself as I took that quiz just this week to present this discussion. So keep that in mind. And also CHAP is a convention that is held every year down in Lancaster. It's just become a girl time for me, a favorite thing that I look forward to every year. sadly, we learned that this year there will not be a CHAP convention, but I would say to get familiar with CHAP, support them as well, because they're a really great nonprofit Pennsylvania homeschool um, uh, organization that is there to help us. They give us resources for free. And then they host this convention where these vendors are just in, dozens of vendors or hundreds even. And you just, have time to sit and talk to the authors of the curriculum, sit and listen to speakers, guest speakers and things. So I would highly encourage you to look into CHAP and utilize that as a resource as well as Rainbow resources for curriculum. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Katie. Okay, so you've heard from everyone on our panel so far. If you'd like to pick anybody's brains, please do so. If there's something that we didn't cover as well and you want to know a little bit more about it, please ask. We do have a few questions that I can ask here, and just let's see here. So Courtney, thank you so much for asking really good questions. Courtney asks about submitting vaccine records to the school. So that is a requirement, yes, Lisa? And why do we need to do that?
The way it's stated is that you can do a religious exemption, or you can submit your records of immunization. So either way, you need to submit one or of those. And maybe Maria, if you have any other comments on that.
That is my understanding too, is
Yes.
You put it with your affidavit and your objectives when you turn that in, or you have an exemption form.
So I guess if you don't want to hand them in, I would sign the religious exemption form.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of discussion about vaccinations in recent years, so that is something I'm sure that there's people who can speak on that more than I can, and how they've handled that with their school district. But at this present time, as far as the law goes, you will need to either have that exemption on file or have the immunization record on file.
Okay. And she asks if there is also an opt-out option for the standardized testing.
An opt-out option? I'm not aware of that. Are you?
I am not aware either, but I will say if you go on to either the pahomeschool.org or even the Pennsylvania Department of Education website, they'll list what standardized tests are acceptable, and some of them are very friendly to the my kids. We've always one of my children is dyslexic, and we've always done the Woodcock-Johnson test, and it is low stress. It's one-on-one with our evaluator. Actually does the testing too, because she's certified to do that, and it's very diagnostic, because it's a one-on-one test, and they just go until they can't go anymore. It's pretty low stress, and so there are options that I think are doable for a lot of different situations. But I don't know of an opt-out. There could be, but I don't know of one.
I'm not aware of one either. However, as Maria said, some of them are very basic. For example, this year they dropped that requirement because of COVID. And despite that, I chose to do the very basic level of the California Achievement. And I think it took us 3, maybe 4 mornings, but it was about a half an hour to 45 minutes of time each of those mornings. So it's a very minimal amount of time. You are able to administer it at home. I have not found it to be very stressful. And you do have the option, if you decide not to pay for that yourself, you do have the option of having your child take the PSSA. You can set that up with your school district. My oldest son did that. He just went into a classroom, did his testing at the elementary school campus. So that is an option as well.
Okay, so I also want to say that their score doesn't mean that they're passing or failing, or you just have to hand it in to your evaluator.
Yes, and the evaluator is the only person who sees the test paper, the results, and then the school district sees the evaluator form without the test results. So you have one person, the evaluator, who sees the test results. And the evaluator does not analyze that. The evaluator is to check to see that it's done. So
Yeah.
basically, the results of that test are for your benefit to see where your child is at and to see your child's strengths and to see areas that you're going to work on improving.
And also, there are a lot of evaluators that are very homeschool friendly. Either they're homeschool moms themselves, or they're just very friendly to the idea of homeschooling. And what they're looking for is progress. They just want to see that learning has happened, which is, what you want done as a mom too, right? And so that's really what they're looking for. They're not coming in like, ask around, because there could be ones that are not great, but all the ones that I've known have, they've just been very friendly, and it's very relaxed. It's like a celebration of what all you've done that year. And they just want to see, my evaluator personally, she wants to see that learning has been done because she's signing her name to it. But that's all. It's just progress. It doesn't have to be a standard. It's, the law has been met and progress has been made.
We
So
are usually much harder on ourselves
Mhm.
than
Yes.
the evaluator or the school district
Yeah.
or the testing facility.
or anybody else,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, so Kim, you brought up, thank you so much. Hi, Kim. Kim brought up that opting out is available in
Oh.
public schools.
Okay.
So I don't know if, for religious purposes, I don't know if that also applies to us homeschoolers, but I would assume so. So here's the thing. We're going to research it because
Yeah.
homeschoolers are great researchers. So I'm
I will
sorry we
ask-
didn't know that one off the top of our head, guys, but we will research. We will put in the
Yeah.
comments afterwards the specific answer to that question. Okay. So let's see here. Next question. Okay, so Courtney is beginning her homeschool journey with her 6-year-old daughter, and she was planning to skip kindergarten because it's optional. Is that allowed? How do you determine what grade your child is being evaluated for at the end of the year?
Yeah, I get that question quite a bit. There is no law that says that you have to put your child in a certain grade. That is really up to you as the parent. So the way the law reads is by age, as we talked about before. If your child is turning 6, as it is right now, we're hoping that might be changed back to 8, but as it is right now, if your child is turning 6 within the school year where you're filing the affidavit, you are to file for them. However, you as the parent can choose their grade, and that might be different subjects. So you might have your child working higher in math, but they may need to be working at grade level in another subject. You also have the freedom to do that. Where I do not know the answer to, and Maria might, is when you get to high school, how that works when you start counting credits.
So for my diploma program, which is what I have done, you have to have 4 years. So we can't do all 4 years of high school in 2 years. Some things that you want to think about is if you were to, now you could potentially start your child early with your high school, like you could start them, say, in 8th grade, and that's an option. But you also want to think, okay, so my child graduates 2 or 3 years early, what are you going to do? And everyone's answer is different. For me, I wouldn't be sending my 15 or 16-year-old out. So they just keep going. The ones that have gotten to those levels very quickly, and not all of mine have, we just find new things for them to learn. I can't say I really know the answer as far as the state recognized diploma, but I would assume as soon as you start counting those credits, you could start counting it. But you do want to kind of think of the end in mind. When my kids are asked what grade they're in, they always answer, well, it's complicated.
Yes.
Because it kind of is. There's like, what legal grade are they in? And then they're in this level for this and this level for this. And there's no even level for this. It's just knowledge, right? So I don't know if that was a helpful answer.
I did homeschool my first 2 together, so that, and then my 2 that are entering 4th grade are also being homeschooled together. So the younger one is keeping up with the older one. So each of those boys, one he's graduated, and then he chose to take a gap year, do some online classes, and work so that he was able to earn money, and he's off to college this fall. And then for the next group of, the next set of boys that I did that with, as long as the younger one is keeping up and I see that it is not a struggle for him, then I will just continue to keep that pace. But I know that at any point I can just pull that separation, if it's necessary, or if I see that, maturity wise, that we're just not there. So
Yeah.
I just enjoy that I can, I can guide that
The
path
options
and
are
go
awesome.
ahead and do that. Yeah.
Just the
Hasn't been a
flexibility.
problem.
Yep. So Courtney, there on the affidavit, it's just going to ask for your child's age. It will not ask for their grade. So you don't have to even put it down. So, okay, let's see. Okay, Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. The affidavit isn't required in New Jersey, but are all of the other things like the portfolios and the testing, do you know that answer? Are they required there in Jersey?
I'm not an expert on New Jersey, but from what I've read, my understanding is that homeschooling and public education in New Jersey are completely separate, with no affidavit required, no portfolio, no evaluator form. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding as well?
I don't know much about
I
New
think
Jersey,
from
but
what I've heard, that includes then that homeschoolers usually do not participate in anything within the public education like they might here in Pennsylvania, including some of the extracurricular activities. But I haven't lived in New Jersey, so I could be wrong on some of that.
the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, that is a really wonderful resource. They can answer all. It's a bunch of like lawyers who give their service to homeschoolers, and so they can answer a lot of legal questions. And they have to answer certain questions, you have to actually get a membership, but just on their site, they may have something for a specific state and their requirements. And each state's Department of Education will have it.
Yes.
I mean, it's a lot of legal jargon to sort through, but it should be available online. It is for Pennsylvania.
Okay. And we
Yeah.
can see if we can ask our Jersey friends too. So, homeschooling friends are just the greatest resource, definitely. Okay. So we have a question here from Nelisha that says, in regards to extracurriculum, can we participate in things such as band with the middle school? And she's specifically in Bethlehem. So that's a good point about it. District to district, things
Yes,
vary.
yes.
So you really do, like I said, homeschooling friends, this Facebook group, great to ask those pointed questions. But do you want to comment on that, Amanda?
I mean, I have heard of one homeschooling family having their child receive both musical instruments at the Bethlehem School District and then be a part of the orchestra. I would assume you'd be able to be a part of the band if you could be a part of the orchestra, but definitely calling the district directly, they would answer all of those questions. By law, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're only required, the public school districts, to allow you to do extracurricular activities, activities that would occur outside of the parameters of the normal school day. So anything that meets before regular instruction or after, they are, by law, you have to be able to be included, but nothing during the day. However, there are some gracious school districts that will allow you to come in. So
I'm also finding a lot more of the Christian schools are starting to open their doors to homeschoolers and allowing them to pop in for classes, not just pop in, but like to sign in for like art or math or anything. So
Yes.
I know Bethlehem Christian School has started opening their doors, and some of the others as well. So that might be worth looking into, especially depending on your location.
Okay, great. We've got a lot of commenting going on about the opt-out option. So thank you so much for everybody who's chiming in here.
That's great.
It says that there is an opt-out option for kids going to public school, but there currently is no opt-out in the law for homeschoolers for testing.
Okay.
So thank you guys for chiming
good to
in
know.
on that one. And good point here about cyber students. Cyber schooling a lot of times is considered public schooling depending upon the cyber program that you choose. So if you are part of a cyber program, then you, as a public school student, you could then opt out. Let's see, anything else? Okay, it says, what is required as proof for health and dental services? Do I need to write up a letter for my dentist and pediatrician to sign? Hi, Lorena.
My understanding is as long as you have some evidence that your child has received those services in your personal records, you can just let the school district know that you have that on file at home. To be honest with you, the state of Pennsylvania has been very unbearing in their approach to homeschooling. Both Maria and I have been evaluating now for a number of years, and my phone number is always on that evaluator form, and I have never been called. So there are possibly examples out there of people who maybe have been followed up on, but my experience has been that there's not a lot of that happening. So I don't think that needs to be a fear. I think as long as you have some records at home that your child is being taken care of by a dentist, by a family doctor, you will be fine. So,
Yes.
I have firsthand experience in that my school district did request that specifically of me, and I called HSLDA as a member. They said, we'll be happy to write a letter for you if you want, or you could just tell them that by law, it's not required that you include that. You're just making a statement that you attest in your affidavit that you have provided that care. And I said, well, go ahead, write a letter. And then I never heard from them again. And I've just continued on for like the last 12 more years, just doing it as I have, whatever. So it
I've
hasn't
had
been a problem.
experience
Did you?
with that too. And I'll just put out there that oftentimes, so school districts, there's like someone who's over the homeschoolers. And from what I understand, it kind of just rotates from person to person to person. And so it changes, and the person doesn't necessarily know the law. We probably all know the law better than they do because that's just an assignment they've been given. So that's why HSLDA is a great resource to have. Homeschool friends who've gone through this, and we know, no, you don't need to do that, because on your affidavit you attest to a whole lot of things, and that should be enough. But HSLDA has been a great
we've been throwing
resource.
around that acronym, HSLDA, Homeschool Law and Defense
Legal Defense
Association.
Yeah.
And you would find that online, and they would have a lot of information to help.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we covered all of the questions for the evening, unless anybody has any to throw in here at the last minute. Definitely thank you to everybody here. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I guess I didn't introduce myself very well, too. Everybody else said, I have 4 children. This coming year, I will be homeschooling all 4 of them, and that has never happened before for me. So I'll have a senior in high school, and he'll be graduating next year. And he was my guy that threw me into homeschooling when I thought homeschooling was this completely other category. I had never heard about it. I had never had any friends who homeschooled. And we just were thrust into it for many different reasons. And I can tell you 100% I don't regret a single day of homeschooling with him. And just the journey has come full circle back. So he'll be graduating, and then I have an upcoming 8th/9th grader, and then I have a upcoming 6th grader and an upcoming 4th grader. So I love it. I can't say I started with it, but I think we all would encourage you just to give it a try. And we're here for you, and we will be posting this recording as a YouTube link, and that way you'll be able to share with your friends who might not be a part of the Homeschool Moms of the Lehigh Valley group on Facebook. But if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them if you think of them down the line later tonight or tomorrow when you're, whenever you have that thought pop into your mind. Please just ask on the group page, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Does anybody else have any closing remarks? No? Good? Okay, well, thank you for joining us once again, and we hope you have a great night.
All right.
All right. Thank
night.
you.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
I'll do like Channel 69.
That's funny, Katie.
That was so fun. Thank you for letting me participate.